Hello, friends. I'm glad you're joining me today for the start of a new devotional series. The title of this series is Bound and Determined, Bearing Burdens. It comes from Galatians chapter 6, and today we're going to look at how important it is to care for other people, to be concerned about other people. As we live this Christian life, we need to be bound and determined and bear one another's burdens. And so let's go ahead and just read the first few verses of Galatians chapter 6, and then we'll discuss it. Brethren, if a man is overtaken in any trespass, you who are spiritual, restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness, considering yourself, lest you also be tempted. Bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. And so we'll look at some other verses in that passage as we dig in, but the importance today is that we need to have a concern for the welfare of others. When we are trying to bear one another's burdens, we're trying to lift our own loads. And so Paul is developing a kind of a priority for the Christian as we recognize that we don't live this life alone. We live this life with one another as God is building his family and his people. We are one of that family. And so while we work hard to strive on our own to carry the load that God's placed on us, we also recognize the needs of other people in the church and the world. So we must care for others. I remember as I was putting this message together, I was remembering the Pilgrim's Progress, and how there was a character in that book named Ignorance. And Ignorance had entered into the King's Highway trying to get to the celestial city, but he did not enter by the right path. And Christian, who the story features, is trying desperately to make it to the celestial city. And he is working and striving, and he is doing the best to carry this incredible burden that is on his shoulders. And this burden is the weight of sin that he's recognized and the need that he has for God to remove his sin. And there's a scene in the Pilgrim's Progress where Christian confronts the cross of Christ, and that burden that is on his back that he feels so heavy is removed, and it rolls away. And unfortunately, for Ignorance, that's not what happens. And Christian is released in the story from his burden, and he makes it across the rivers to the celestial city. But Ignorance, who doesn't do things in the right way, rather than being bound and determined to do it God's way and to enter into his eternal abode, ends up himself bound and his fate determined as he is sold back to the evil prince for refusing to do things God's way. And so I think it's important as we try to live the Christian life that we really work at doing it the right way. What is God's way? And part of that begins not with a look at myself, but first a look at the needs of the believers around me. So care for others is where we begin. Our burdens we share. Our burdens we share, and if we look at the first chapter here, we realize that there's a few burdens that we share, that we pick up other believers with, and one is in regards to sin. We must care for fellow Christians in regard to sin. That first two verses, if we go back over it, even if one is caught in a trespass, you who are spiritual, restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness. Each one looking to yourself so that you will not be tempted. So we are going to try and lift each other up as we strive against sin. And we personally strive against sin, but we recognize that everybody in the family of Christ still struggles with sin. And so we want to lift each other up. We want to encourage people. We want to try to not be stumbling blocks for our brothers in Christ, but rather to encourage people to stay the course, be victorious. And so whatever your sin is, or whatever you know a brother or sister in Christ has a sin in their life, look for ways to encourage them to continue in the fight. Be an accountability partner. Be a prayer partner. Find ways to lift them up. We must care for our fellow Christians in regards to their general need. Verse 6 says, the one who is taught the word is to share all good things with the one who teaches him. So as you're interacting with Christians in your life that are encouraging you in the word, try to share and encourage them as well, especially those that are leading and directing the church, leading and directing Bible studies and things. Look to care for them. We have needs, and we need to recognize God sometimes has given you the ability to encourage or share or lift a brother in their need. And finally, in regards to their general welfare of all. Verse 10 says, let us then, when we have opportunity, do good to all people, especially to those who are of the household of faith. We need to care for each other, lift each other up, lift up the needs of those in our community, but especially have a good eye on those in the church. So our burdens we share, but we also do so while we're protecting our own souls. Our care for others must not bring us into temptation. This is really important. The second part of verse 1 says, Restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness, but each one looking to yourself, so that you also won't be tempted. In the Christian life, while we are looking to encourage one another, we have to take guard of our own souls and make sure that we don't put ourselves at risk. Sometimes Christians who've come out of addiction might not be the best Christian to pull a brother out of that same area of addiction, because they could be pulled back in. And we have to have some wisdom here as we're exercising and walking in the faith of how we can help. And maybe we can help certain brothers and sisters in certain ways, but there's certain situations we can't pull ourselves into. And we also have to guard against false pride. Verse 3 says, "For if anyone thinks he is something when he is nothing, he deceives himself." And so we can get to a point where we feel like we have arrived, and we can allow our victories in Christ to become a sense of pride. And this, of course, is terrible for our own spiritual development, because the Bible tells us God resists the proud and he gives grace to the humble. I've heard it said this way, God gives grace to the humble, but he pickles the proud. He preserves the foolish, but he pickles the proud. And so be humble. Don't allow your own victories to give you a false sense of spiritual pride, because we're not for the blood of Christ. We're not for God's grace. What would we be? So care for others, bear one another's burdens, and watch over your own soul so you won't be pulled back into temptation. I hope that encourages you. I hope that you will continue and be devoted to looking out for the welfare of your brothers and sisters in Christ and the general welfare of the community. God bless you. Until next time.